Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Interesting case. There's the thumbnail up on the screen. Sean Diddy Combs arrested, held without bail on a federal indictment. The indictment is for sex trafficking and racketeering charges. A day after his arrest, the music mogul known as Diddy was accused of running a criminal enterprise that threatened and abused women. He pleaded not guilty. Sean Combs, the embattled music mogul, was denied bail on Tuesday after pleading not guilty to charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. In a federal indictment unsealed on Tuesday, Mr. Combs, this is according to the New York Times, 54 years old, was described as the boss of a years-long criminal enterprise that threatened and abused women, coercing them to participate against their will in drug-fueled orgies with male prostitutes and threatening them with violence or the loss of financial support if they refused. The 14-page indictment against Mr. Combs, a producer, record executive, and performer who was also known as Diddy and Puff Daddy, came a day after he was arrested in a Manhattan hotel room following an investigation that has been active since at least earlier this year. Prosecutors said Mr. Combs and his employees engaged in kidnapping, forced labor, arson, and bribery, and kept firearms at the ready. In asking a magistrate to deny Mr. Combs' request to be released on bail, prosecutors argued that he was a threat to the community. One of the prosecutors, Emily A. Johnson, called him a serial abuser and a serial obstructor, and said his wealth would make it easy for him to escape undetected. She noted that after Mr. Combs was arrested, law enforcement found what they suspected to be narcotics in his hotel room in the form of pink powder. Mr. Combs' lawyer suggested a $50 million bond, but Judge Robin F. Tarnofsky denied their request, citing Mr. Combs' anger issues and a history of substance abuse, and ordered Mr. Combs detained while he awaits trial. My concern, the judge said, is that this is a crime that happens behind closed doors. As Mr. Combs walked out of the courtroom, he looked toward his supporters in the room, including his 3 adult sons, and put his hand on his heart. Outside the courtroom, Mark Agnafilo, one of Mr. Combs' lawyers, said they would appeal the denial of bail and added, "We believe in him wholeheartedly." Well, what is an attorney going to say? Of course, that his client is innocent, of course. So we're going to take a look at the 14-page indictment. And the indictment somewhat mirrors indictments that we've seen against the mafia, because they use that term RICO, racketeering, investigative corrupt organizations. And everyone that's ever been charged with RICO shivers in their boots, because they know it's an easier thing for the federal prosecutor to prove, and it has an ongoing criminal enterprise. And usually if a defendant is found guilty under the RICO statutes, they don't play. In fact, what he's charging, racketeering, he can get life in prison. If he's found guilty of racketeering, the sentence is life. If he's found guilty of sex trafficking, he can get 15 years. So either way, these charges are absolutely no joke. So folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your wig, your toupee, your glass of wine, your cup of coffee, your service dog. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
To show how absolutely serious these charges are, and no joke, I'm going to put the federal prosecutor on the screen who is bringing these charges.
As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs.
So, I mean, there you have it. I mean, just absolutely horrific situation. Let me just pull that off the screen. These charges are no joke, And as I said, the RICO statute, racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations, can put him in prison for the very rest of his life. I'm going to pull up I have the 14-page indictment. I'll put it up on the screen. I'm going to read some of it to you so you just know that these charges are not a figment of anyone's imagination, but very, very real. And here, I'm going to pull this up on the screen. This is for the racketeering. This is from the United States District Court, Southern District of New York. Count 1, racketeering conspiracy. For decades, Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. P. Diddy, a.k.a. Diddy, a.k.a. PD, a.k.a. Love, the defendant abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Combs relied on his employees' resources and influence of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Sean Combs, I'm not going to read all those other AKAs. The defendant operated his business headquartered at various times in Manhattan and Los Angeles under a variety of United States corporate entities, including Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global. Collectively, the Combs business corporate entities in the Combs business included, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. At all times relevant in this indictment, Sean Combs, the defendant, engaged in a persistent and pervasive pattern of abuse toward women and other individuals. This abuse was at times verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual. As part of his pattern of abuse, Combs manipulated women to participate in highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity with male commercial sex workers. At times, Combs and others acting at his direction made arrangements for women and commercial sex workers to fly to Combs' location. Combs ensured participation from the women by, among other things, obtaining and distributing narcotics to them, controlling their careers, leveraging his financial support, and threatening to cut off the same and using intimidation and violence. I'm not going to read the whole because there's 14 pages in this indictment, but just to know this is a federal indictment, which is usually recognized as a lot more severe than the state upon a conviction. And the RICO statute, racketeering influence corrupt organizations, is absolutely no joke and can put you in prison for the rest of your life. Let's hear from ABC News.
So threatening and abusing multiple victims over years. Prosecutors say he had a lot of help, and those alleged accomplices are now in their sights. Our senior investigative correspondent Aaron Tursky has the latest. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning to you, George. With Sean Combs locked up here at this federal jail, investigators are now turning to his inner circle. This morning, as hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs fights racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and prostitution charges, investigators are working to determine who his co-conspirators were and whether they, too, should be charged.
He used his business and employees of that business and other close associates to get his way. Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff.
Just this week, prosecutors said they served Combs as head of security with a search warrant for his electronic devices.
You can rest assured that the feds have already talked to the people who worked for Combs, and all of those people have already probably given statements.
The 54-year-old has pleaded not guilty to charges he led a criminal conspiracy that abused women. The indictment alleged some of Combs's employees helped set up freak-offs in which women were forced into sex acts with male prostitutes. Prosecutors said they booked hotel rooms, stocked them with supplies, and arranged travel for the sex workers. A centerpiece of the case, this 2016 video obtained by CNN that shows Combs punching, kicking, and dragging former girlfriend Cassie Ventura. Prosecutors said they have evidence Combs's staff members remained in contact with the victim to ensure that she would not talk to the police. Combs is now isolated from the general population in a decrepit federal jail.
He takes, his strength of character and his growth very seriously, and he works really hard to be a better person every day.
His attorney said he would ask a federal appeals court to release Combs on bail, but guys, that may be a tough ask because pretrial detention is presumed for defendants like Combs who are accused of sex trafficking.
So there's no way, I shouldn't say that, but his attorney, of course, wants him to be bailed. They want him to be bailed out, but he's considered to be a danger to the community because he has all this money, and B, he has threatened people in the past with violence, with guns. That's what this whole case is all about, is about what he's forced people to do. So how in good conscience can a federal judge allow bail, even though his attorneys have offered $50 million? In fact, P. Diddy was liquidating some of his assets to raise that kind of cash. So he was offering $50 million in order to get out of jail. He's in the Brooklyn House of Detention, or it's a federal holding, and it's not a nice place, obviously. And so he wants to get the hell out of there. But his attorneys, his high-powered attorneys, it doesn't seem like they have the juice to get him out of there. Because again, federal prosecutors are saying, no, he's a danger to the community. He is an absolute danger to the community. So we do not want him bailed. He has his own private jet. He's got the resources. He's got the money to both bribe people and to get people to do his bidding.
Not only is P. Diddy behind bars, but now he's on suicide watch in one of the most dangerous jails in the country. Here's everything we know so far about Diddy's life on the inside. I'm Sierra Gillespie, and this is Law and Crime News. It's been a big week for 54-year-old Sean Diddy Combs, kicking it off with a federal indictment on Monday. And now we're getting word that he's on suicide watch. He's being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn in the Eastern New York Judicial District, much to the dismay of his legal team. Earlier this week, Diddy filed for bond 2 separate times. His attorneys writing in the motions that MDC is not fit for pretrial detention. They even requested he be transferred out of New York to Essex County in New Jersey, but it was ultimately up to the Bureau of Prisons to decide where he ended up. According to Diddy's legal team, an inmate was murdered at MDC just this summer, and at least 4 inmates have died by suicide over the past 3 years. Now, their client is on suicide watch, meaning he's separated from traditional prison housing. It's unclear whether he's actually suicidal or if it's just a safety precaution, but we do know a mental health professional visits his cell at least several times a day. The U.S. Department of Justice Institute of Corrections describes suicide watch as supervisory precautions taken for suicidal inmates that require frequent observation. So what does all that mean? For that, we go to criminal defense attorney Mike Corbanix. One of the reasons that P. Diddy's attorneys were saying we don't want him there is because they say it's really dangerous. There have been suicides, there have been murders, apparently. Is that true? Do you think it's a pretty dangerous place?
All jails are dangerous depending on who the inmate is, quite frankly. So, I mean, it's a high profile case. Nobody knows where the case is really going and what it really entails yet. So I would assume that they're just being overcautious because he's not like your average defendant. He's a very well-known person who has a lot of prestige, and it would be interesting to see what goes on in the jail with him. But I'm sure he's going to need a little bit more of protective coverage in the jail.
I'm wondering if that's why they placed him on suicide watch now, kind of what you were saying, protective coverage, because he is such a high-profile inmate. Do you think that could be part of it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, going from a life where you live in a mansion to going to sit in a jail facility is not something easy to deal with.
Also, whenever we're thinking about cases like this, the big federal ones and just similar allegations, I go to Jeffrey Epstein. And obviously, we know what happened there. He never was able to make it to trial because he died by suicide. Is that something that everyone is trying to avoid here to make sure that any of the inmates don't actually die by suicide?
Well, of course. I mean, a jail has a responsibility. It's a jail. People in that jail are being held, they're presumed innocent, and there's a responsibility, since the person's not free to do what they want, to protect them and to make sure that they're mentally stable and that they're protected.
When I heard suicide watch, my mind went to Rex Heuermann, who's the alleged Go-Go Beach killer. Obviously, he is still presumed innocent at this time, but I do recall after he was arrested, he was placed on suicide watch. And I'm wondering if that's just kind of another thing because it was a big case, a big name, that he was not suicidal at the time, and it's possible now that P. Diddy isn't suicidal.
It's not that he is suicidal. It's that he needs the coverage because no doubt many prisoners that are in the Metropolitan House of Detention, a federal holding facility, would love to stick a shiv in him, and who knows if there's even a contract on P. Diddy's life. But I'm seeing a lot of you guys in the chat saying, oh, he's going to sing like a parakeet. People are going to sing on him. People are going to flip on him. This is, for a guy at his level, he's a billionaire, right? Will he get certain provisions and more privileges because of his status as a billionaire? No doubt. Money talks, bullshit walks, as we all know. So don't even have them try to sell that to you. He's going to be treated like everyone else. That's not true. He is going to be treated like a billionaire, and his attorneys are feverishly behind the scenes working, using every trick in the book, everything at their disposal. If they cannot get him bailed, they want to move him. You heard that. They want to move him to Essex County, New Jersey, to a friendlier facility, because the Metropolitan Detention Facility in Brooklyn is no joke, as we all know. So his attorney, Agnafilo, wants him the hell out of there. They're going to work on that. They said ultimately where he gets put, where he is incarcerated until the trial or during the trial is up to the Bureau of Prisons. So do you think that they can't get to someone at the Bureau of Prisons that has influence? Someone influential can get to whoever the boss is at the Bureau of Prisons and move P. Diddy to a friendlier holding facility while he goes on trial? I mean, it may not make any sense, because if he's going to be tried by the Eastern District federal prosecutors, that'll be in Brooklyn. So that's probably why they want to have him in Brooklyn. But a guy with P. Diddy's money and his juice may be able to have his incarceration moved to Essex County while he's awaiting trial.
On charges of sex trafficking and racketeering.
TMZ has been following this case for months now, and Charles Lati-Baudier is joining us to dive deeper into what is happening. Charles, I mean, shocking is an understatement when you hear the details of this case. What are your thoughts after hearing the indictment yesterday?
Good morning, Brian and Natalie. I got to tell you, my thoughts reading the 14-page indictment yesterday were that there are a lot of people in Hollywood who are probably worried about which Diddy parties they were at and what was going on. That's not to say that they were necessarily even involved in any of the things that are alleged by the U.S. Attorney's Office. But if you're at that party and it turns out that that's when he set up one of these freak-off sex parties, or that it was going on in another room and you didn't know about it, there's a good chance that you're going to be called by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Certainly if you were involved, you would get a call, because they're going to want to know everything you want to know and may even want you to be a witness. I just think, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what this case, this case is going to touch and involve. And the feds have said that this remains an open investigation. There could be more charges for Diddy. There could be more charges for other people involved. And usually the way this works is once they find out other people are involved or were witnesses, they bring them in and they sort of lean on them. And it's sort of like, you're going to cooperate with us, or there's a possibility that you could face charges. So this is going to be a slow developing a case here, because we're just getting started. And I don't see how this trial begins anytime before next year.
There are a lot of wild allegations in those documents that came out yesterday, including 1,000 bottles of baby oil. What surprised you the most about what you read yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, that, Brian, was definitely an alarming graph of the indictment when you read that when they raided, I believe it was the Miami home, where they found 1,000 bottles of, and they said that these were items that were used at the freak-offs. There were also large amounts of drugs, they said, cocaine, ketamine, Molly, GHB, the rape drug. So, they said that the house, according to the feds, that was stocked for these parties that were going on. And then to read their description of how Diddy, as they say, lured women into joining these parties. And they say that he would meet them or lure them, get to know them, and lure them in, thinking they would think that there was going to be a romantic relationship with him. And then it would turn out that they would be at these freak-offs where they would be forced to have, or drugged and forced to have sex with male prostitutes that he was bringing in. And that's one of the counts that he's facing also, is the transportation of individuals for a purpose of prostitution. So really alarming allegations laid out in court. Diddy, of course, has pled not guilty to all of it. And then the real kicker for him at the end of the day was that the judge said, you will be held without bail. And that means however long it takes for this trial to begin, he will be in a federal detention facility in Brooklyn, and not a very nice one. In fact, a fairly notorious one. So you got to figure it. He wants out of there, and he wants out as soon as possible.
We're in this era right now, Charles, of men with power falling from grace in Hollywood. And when I think about Harvey Weinstein, that was an open secret in Hollywood for a very long time about.
I just want to comment on some of these things, but still, when the rich the very wealthy get in trouble, they're really not exactly like us, right? I mean, well, Jeffrey Epstein never made it to trial, but have we ever seen Jeffrey Epstein's list of his clients that flew on his planes? That still hasn't come out. So who is protecting all the people that went to Epstein Island? Who's protecting them? Someone is, right? Because it's an embarrassment to many of the people that went on Epstein's planes, went to Epstein Island. Some very, very powerful people. So are these very, very powerful people able to keep this stuff quiet? You just saw the picture before of P. Diddy getting the key to the city from Mayor Adams. That's embarrassing, isn't it? That's embarrassing. Now, and there had always been not just rumors, but there was smoke about P. Diddy. Do you guys remember in 1992 at the CCNY tragedy? That was when they had a basketball game of consisting of rappers playing basketball, and they oversold it, and they didn't have the proper amount of security. And the people going into the gym had to go down this chute that was maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 feet wide. And there was thousands of people pushing, and the doors were shut. 9 people were crushed to death. That was P. Diddy's event. And from some of the detectives that investigated that he actually had to pay civilly for some of those wrongful deaths. He had to pay it out of his own pocket. But on that night, he was seen running out the back of the gym with the cash box. So that's how much character this guy has, that his attorney Agnifilo says his character. Yeah. And of course, in all the rap wars, and again, it's never been proven, but his name has come up in a lot of the murders of rap artists and a lot of other criminal activity. His name has come up, and maybe because of his power, his influence, and yes, people that he knows, he was able to stay above and has never been charged. Well, that's all changed now.
What he was doing with victims. Was this also the case with P. Diddy, that the people kind of knew this was going on?
I will say this: there were always been whispers about his power and how he wielded that power. But I can't say I heard any whispers about these freak offs, and it's really alarming. You know, we were talking about it yesterday. One, these parties had a lot of individuals. In fact, the U.S. Attorney's Office says that the parties would sometimes go on for days. So there are a lot of individuals involved, and yet, and they say this has been going on for more than 10 years, and yet we didn't hear about that. So that means that all the people that were involved, according to the feds, that he managed to keep them all quiet, that nobody would speak about it. And that does sort of speak to the kind of power he wielded and the fear that people had of him. We're also talking about the fact that the beating of Cassie, which was captured on the hotel surveillance video, that was 6 years ago,
As
and
alleged when Combs
nobody
didn't get his
knew about it. Nobody heard about it. Think about all the people that were at the hotel who may have known about it, people who saw the surveillance video and never spoke about it. And like you said, we're in an era where when things like that happen, people speak out about it. So the fact that no one did, and that it only took this, really Cassie's lawsuit before any of this started coming out, it does kind of speak to the power that he wielded, and that the fact that nobody wanted to cross him.
And Charles, what do you think happens next in this case? Members of Sean Combs' family have been ordered to give up their passports. He's currently in jail. What do you think happens from here?
Well, his attorneys, the first thing that's going to happen is today, his attorneys are going back into court. They have appealed the bail ruling. And like I said, I'm sure he wants out, and that's their first job right now, is to get him out. They've offered a $50 million package for bail. That was rejected yesterday, but they're going to take another swing at it today. And then after that, what happens, look, he did surrender his passport to his lawyer. We should say the way his team put it out originally, they made it sound like he had turned it over to the authorities. He had turned over his passport back in April to his lawyer, as did his children and his mother. And their point was they wanted to make the case to the court that, look, we're cooperating here. He is not a flight risk. And they feel like that the U.S. Attorney's Office undermined that by raiding his hotel on Monday night and arresting him when they say he was in New York because he was more than willing to surrender. In fact, the plan was for him to surrender on Tuesday, and then for some reason the feds decided to arrest him Monday night. Diddy's attorneys think they did that so that it would look like he wasn't cooperating, and then the judge would deny him bail, which, as it turns out, is what happened.
Well, Charles, thank you so much for your thoughts on this morning. You guys always have so much information.
So again, these charges, this 14-page federal indictment is absolutely, positively no joke in the world. I mean, here's one on page Article 4 in the indictment. Physical abuse by Sean, aka Puff Daddy, the defendant, was recurrent and widely known. On numerous occasions from at least in or about 2009 and continuing for years, Combs assaulted women by, among other things, striking, punching, dragging, throwing objects at, and kicking them. These assaults were at times witnessed by others and included one instance at a Los Angeles hotel in or about March 2016, which was captured on video and later publicly reported, where Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a woman as she was attempting to leave. When a member of the hotel security staff intervened, Combs attempted to bribe the staff member to ensure silence. Combs' violence was also not limited to these women. It extended to his employees, witnesses to his abuse, and others. The defendant used the Combs business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his abuse and commercial sex. Those employees, including security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, and other close associates, acted as Combs' intermediaries, and their conduct was facilitated and assisted by Combs' control of the Combs business. Look, if this was John Gotti, and look, it may as well be. John Gotti was never a billionaire, right? But he was recognized as the head of the Gambino crime family. Sean Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, whatever you want to call him, he's a billionaire, right? And he's been carrying out a criminal enterprise. And the RICO statute that we know the feds use that on organized crime, which is what P. Diddy is. He's organized crime. Would you, if you were the judge, despite how much money he has, how powerful his attorneys are, how powerful his friends are, would you release him on bond so that he can continue to threaten people, continue to bribe people, so that he can beat these charges, find out who the witnesses are? Look, the feds have been doing this investigation for a while. As you heard, they just got his head of security, and they served warrants on all his electronic devices. So even when you think that you aren't going to cooperate, you have no choice, because they just got all of your electronic devices, and they're going to use them against Sean P. Diddy, and that's why this is such a powerful, powerful charge when brought by the feds.
Out in New York City, reporting indicates that he was taken to custody last night by federal authorities at the Park Hyatt Hotel. This apparently comes after a grand jury has indicted him, which is not surprising. This is not something that we didn't expect. There was reporting for months that the 54-year-old would be the target of a criminal investigation, and this comes after his homes in Los Angeles and Miami were raided back in March. Now, he has been hit with numerous lawsuits alleging sexual assault, sex trafficking, illegal narcotics possession, gun possession. Now, to be clear, we didn't know what the charges would be. We guessed. And it looks like our guess was right, because as Mark Agnifilio, his attorney, said to the press today and last night they were anticipating racketeering and sex trafficking charges. And that is what we see in this grand jury indictment. It is 14 pages long. There are 3 counts. One that makes up the majority of this indictment is the racketeering enterprise. So let me go through it with you right now. Now, racketeering, and by the way, I will tell you this is similar to what we saw with R. Kelly, who, as we know, was also indicted in federal court in New York. That was the Eastern District of New York. This is the Southern District. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 30 years in prison. So racketeering, what we were
30 years in prison. Do you think that they have at least as strong a case against P. Diddy as they had against R. Kelly? I don't know the answer to that, but this 14-page federal indictment. And when I say that the feds don't play, they don't bring indictments to lose the case. So despite the fact that P. Diddy has some top attorneys, the feds have unlimited money. They can exhaust you for years and just prosecute you to death.
Talking about here is a criminal enterprise, and a conspiracy to commit the racketeering statute is there's a criminal agreement, there's a number of overt acts, there's predicate crimes. So there's things that Diddy is not necessarily being charged with on an individual basis, but they make up this criminal enterprise. In other words, there's evidence that will show this is a criminal enterprise. So I'm going to go through it with you right now. Again, this is from the Southern District of New York. It says overview, count 1, racketeering conspiracy. For decades, Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, P. Diddy.
Well, I read that before. So he has a 14-page federal indictment with the racketeering charges, as I said, they can deliver. If he's convicted, he can get a life term for that. You can get life in prison for a federal racketeering charge. It's totally, it's absolutely no joke. And that's why he's probably freaking out. That's why his attorneys offered the feds $50 million of bond money to let him out. And guess what? They said no.
Presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. First, to ask you real quick, when do you think this trial would even happen with Combs?
That's tough to predict. I think kind of your run-of-the-mill federal trials usually take about a year to get to trial, sometimes more. It's possible that this case will be designated complex by the judge, given what we're hearing about the type and volume of electronic evidence in the case. Certainly if Diddy stays incarcerated pending trial, his lawyers may wish to move expeditiously in the case, but it's a balance when you're a defense attorney. Obviously, you want to get your client out of jail as quickly as possible, or potentially as quickly as possible, but you also want to make sure you're prepared for trial. And that involves ensuring you have enough time to prepare the case properly.
And again, moving forward, with respect to the witnesses and the victim.
Vivian Levy, will you explain racketeering? Well, racketeering what they're saying in RICO. It's an ongoing criminal enterprise, not just of one crime, but numerous crimes: prostitution, trafficking, drugs, kidnapping. That in the scope of a criminal enterprise, that is considered to be racketeering, and those charges can get a defendant life in prison upon conviction. And I'm not saying he's going to get convicted, but if he does, the stakes are extremely, extremely high.
Victims who would potentially be testifying at a trial, how do you keep them protected? When do you reveal who they are? How does it work in terms of them testifying in an upcoming trial? Because that's a very, very sensitive issue moving forward, particularly since now, after the release of the indictment, we're still not entirely sure who is cooperating with the government.
Yeah, that was a big concern for us in the R. Kelly case, because the victims that were publicly known faced an incredible amount of harassment. both online and some even had crimes committed against them. So, you have to at a certain stage tell the defense who your witnesses are going to be and and identify the victims for the defense so they can prepare properly. But I imagine that the prosecutors will do what we did and tried to do in the R. Kelly case, which is kind of make sure that the identities of the victims are not publicly disclosed for as long as possible. And for certain victims who were kind of never publicly known in our case, we filed motions to allow them to testify under pseudonyms, which the court granted. So I imagine that similar motions will likely be made in the Diddy case, and they now have a precedent to follow for doing just that.
And before I let you go, one final question about pretrial release. Look, I think his attorney at the time of this recording is now appealing that decision to a higher court. Are there any, and going from your experience with the R. Kelly case, and I don't recall off the top of my head how many attempts he might have made to have that bail issue revisited, but are there opportunities for Combs to have a court revisit this? Are there opportunities for him where that bail, he will be allowed out on bail? Or do you think, given the decisions of the magistrate judge, the district court judge, your experience with R. Kelly, that is unlikely?
I think it's unlikely that he gets released, but I don't think it's unlikely that he will continue to try to get released. R. Kelly filed a number of motions and appeals to do just that. He was not successful. I think it's particularly difficult on appeal to the Second Circuit because they will not be conducting a de novo review of the district court judge's decision. They will apply a very deferential standard. And so the question won't be if those judges would have made a different decision if they were deciding this in the first instance, but rather whether the judge below made a clear error. And
right.
That's a tough road to climb.
Yeah, because it makes sense why the judge decided this way. You might disagree, but you're like, it might have the legal backing to understand that. Like the district court judge was actually reviewing the magistrate court judge's decision de novo, fresh, clean slate, clean eyes, not giving deference to what the prior judge said, and clearly was persuaded by the prosecution's argument. So this is now the beginning of it. It will progress. I'm sure there's going to be more similarities moving forward between Combs' case and R. Kelly's case. But Nadi Shihata, thank you so much.
So again, comparing it to the R. Kelly case, R. Kelly also did apply for bail on numerous occasions and was turned down each and every time. And again, Professor Geary, who was in the chat, said, P. Diddy is like the mafia. He really is. And you can't put him back out there so he can threaten the witnesses that are against him or that may testify against him or intimidate the witnesses that are out there. And you heard that prosecutor, that federal prosecutor that was just talking, saying that they released the witness names as late as possible, because if they put their names out there, they are open to attack. They're open to bribery. They're open to being threatened. So all these witnesses, they have to be at some point in the discovery process made known to the defense. But just think of how dangerous that could be. And, when they start talking about some of the people that attended his parties, what are these people in danger? Are these people afraid that they're going to have to testify against P. Diddy? You notice how, all the Hollywood people that were on Epstein Island, they ran for cover. So this is very similar to that. And of course, it was known that P. Diddy threw great parties and, but it just came out about these alleged freak-off parties, which are just, who knew about those? I guess insiders did. Sunshine Susie, thank you so much for the 1999 super sticker. Do the feds ever make a D-verse going to trial? Sunshine Susie, they do, but I think they got such a strong case against P. Diddy, and I don't think they're looking to cut a deal. Having said that, I don't think that's an impossibility, but they've been investigating that, and the feds also feel that he's been in this criminal enterprise since 2009. I mentioned in 1992 was the CCNY tragedy where 9 people got crushed to death going to his charity basketball game. And he was ordered years later to pay some of the damages to their families. So, all these very powerful people, the Harvey Weinsteins, the Jeffrey Epsteins, the R. Kellys, the government better have a slamming, strong case against them because these people got money and they got friends in high places that can help them. In the case of Harvey Weinstein, I think once it was really, really out there and the scope and the depth of all the people he abused, I don't think anyone wanted to come to his defense. Let's see if that's true with P. Diddy. But P. Diddy is by far the most powerful based on the amount of money he has. He's a billionaire. That can buy you a lot of influence.
That he forced J-Lo to carry an illegal weapon. All of this leads us into the new millennium, though. A woman, only identified as Jane Doe, says Diddy raped her in 2003 when she was just 17. In the lawsuit she filed last year, she included pictures of herself at Diddy's recording studio in New York. From there, we fast forward to late 2005 or 2006, when Diddy met Cassandra Ventura, who would later be known publicly as the singer Cassie. According to Cassie's lawsuit, she started working with Diddy when she was just 19 years old, and he was 37. She says Diddy began, quote, almost immediately asserting possession and control over her, and inserting himself into all aspects of her career and her personal life. That includes things like forcing Cassie to use illegal drugs and have sex with prostitutes as Diddy watched or masturbated. She also alleges he recorded many of these interactions. The next stop on the Diddy timeline is 2011, when Cassie had a brief flirtatious relationship with rapper Kid Cudi. She says that in 2012, Diddy told her that he was going to blow up Kid Cudi's car and that he wanted to ensure that Kid Cudi was home with his friends when it happened. Around that time, Kid Cudi's car exploded in his driveway. From there, we have to hop to September 2022, when Rodney Jones, also known as Lil Rod, began working with Diddy. For the next year and a half, Lil Rod alleges he suffered abuse, all at the hands of Diddy himself. At times, Lil Rod says Diddy touched his private areas without consent and forced Lil Rod to watch him shower or have naked body massages. Lil Rod says Diddy, quote, attempted to groom Mr. Jones into engaging in gay sex. Then, in 2023, Cassie filed a lawsuit against Diddy under the New York Survivors Act, meaning a sexual assault survivor could file civil suit against their alleged abuser regardless of the statute of limitations. So Cassie filed that suit on November 16th of last year, and though it was settled just one day later, the damage was already done. Before the year's end, Diddy also faced lawsuits from Liza Gardner, Joy Dickerson-Neal, and Jane Doe. After this, Hulu dropped plans for a reality show called Diddy Plus 7 that was supposed to be about the singer and his family. At the same time, other major brands that he had worked with over the years severed ties. That brings us to February 26, 2024, when Lil Rod filed his lawsuit. Just about a month later, on March 25th, federal investigators raided 2 of Diddy's homes in both Los Angeles and Miami. The same day, Diddy's alleged drug mule, Brendan Paul, was arrested at the Miami airport. He was charged with cocaine and marijuana possession, but avoided any jail time with a plea deal that required him to enter a drug diversion program. That moves us to April 4th, when Diddy is named a co-defendant in yet another civil lawsuit, this time involving the sexual assault of a woman on a yacht. Diddy's son, Christian, or King Combs, is also listed in the suit. Over the next few weeks, Diddy then files motions to dismiss several of the civil lawsuits against him. But he makes news once again on May 17th when CNN releases shocking surveillance video showing Diddy brutally attack Cassie in a hotel hallway. 2 days later, on May 19th, Diddy posted this to his Instagram.
I was f***ed up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy, go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
2 days after that post, Crystal McKinney filed suit against Diddy, alleging he drugged her and sexually assaulted her back in 2003. All that brings us to September 11th, when singer Dawn Richard filed another civil suit against Diddy, alleging he touched her inappropriately, imprisoned her, and even threatened her life. All this leads us to Monday, September 16th, when Diddy is indicted by a grand jury on federal charges. At about 8:30 that night, he was taken into custody by Homeland Security at the Park Hyatt in New York. The indictment was unsealed on September 17th, charging Diddy with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution.
So, guys, I mean, again, we read that. I have the 14-page indictment. A racketeering. As soon as that word RICO is in any form in an indictment, you got some serious problems. Look at all the women coming out of the woodwork suing him civilly. Look at the male Little Rod suing him civilly. All of these people are going to testify against him criminally. So this is no joke. He seems like he's skated most of his life through his influence, perhaps through his money, perhaps through his connections, and beat, avoid getting arrested. And his name has come up in many things, including murders. Some of you guys had put it in the chat that he was involved in Tupac Shakur's murder. I don't have any evidence of that, but that's been whispered. That's been said. The East Coast, West Coast rap wars of years ago, his name came up in those also. So you can bet. Michael Geary has something in the chat. The Mann Act, bringing a woman across state lines for prostitution, being around for a century. The feds are serious. Yes. And it seems like they have numerous charges of that, not just one. So numerous. Forbidden Planet, if P. Diddy were in government, he would have just considered his problems like the Clintons did. Arkancited. Arkancited. I couldn't read that word. Now I get it. Imachadoro in the chat. It's been a nasty industry with nasty people for a long time. Dawn Aralino, K, so true. The perverts. Sherry Murray, is there a statute of limitations, Sarge and Professor? Well, I don't think that these charges are they're ongoing. So I don't know how far they go back with certain things, but these are ongoing. This is a continuing criminal enterprise. So I don't think they have to worry about the statute of limitations. Gary from the chat, you don't become a billionaire in the rap industry without doing a lot of shady stuff. No doubt. Michael Geary, the perverts prey on the vulnerable in that industry. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed to us, I see a lot of new names in the chat. Hit that subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Share us with your friends and your family. If you want to contribute to us financially, you can join our Patreon with 4 different levels, or you can join our YouTube channel membership, which has 5 different levels. We appreciate all you guys and everything you do. So this is going to be Kay from the chat. All that stuff and doing all that stuff isn't worth it because you always get caught sooner or later. He's had a pretty long reign, Kay, that he hasn't been held accountable for his criminality, for his actions. And many people are coming out of the woodwork now. coming out of the woodwork, and they're ready. It seems like many are ready to testify against him. And as much as his attorneys start saying what a wonderful person he is, I think the reverse of that is actually true. So we shall see.
Mogul Sean Diddy Combs remains behind bars in a Brooklyn, New York federal jail. A stark
The time involved multiple commercial sex workers and often involved a variety of narcotics such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent and subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times by their hair.
While arguing for bail after he was arraigned, Diddy's attorney reportedly told the judge it's not sex trafficking if the participants of the freak-offs wanted to be there. After Diddy was denied bail on Tuesday by a federal judge, his attorney, seemingly disappointed Diddy wasn't issued bail, said he'll continue to fight for his client.
So this was the first step. We have a bail appeal scheduled for tomorrow at 3:30 in front of Judge Carter, the district judge assigned to this case. I think that we made the points that we've been wanting to make. I think he came out. Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent. He came to New York to establish his innocence. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of the charges. There's nothing that the government said in their presentation today that changes anyone's mind about anything. He's been looking forward to this day. He's been looking forward to clearing his name, and he's going to clear his name. And we're going to stand by his side as he does. We believe in him wholeheartedly. He didn't do these things. This was a 10-year relationship. There's no coercion. There's no crime. There's basically just, someone who brought a civil case and now is finding themselves as a witness in a criminal case. And we're going to fight this case with everything we have, as is he. And eventually he's going to be shown to be innocent. And so tomorrow we fight again, and we'll fight every day until we don't have to fight anymore.
Now the once beloved, but also to some feared music mogul, will have to wait to eventually face his fate in federal court. I'm joined now by a really great guest, and that's the state attorney for Palm Beach County, Dave Ehrenberg. Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, Sean Combs, aka Diddy's arrest this week, has made headlines essentially across the globe as he's facing now these federal charges in the sex trafficking case in the Southern District of New York. And his so-called freak-offs are at the center of the prosecution's case. What are your thoughts?
Well, first, it's good to be back with you, Elizabeth. The allegations are horrifying. And my first thought was, how did these things happen for so long with so many people involved and no one seemed to tip off authorities? I mean, according to the indictment, these were highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity in hotels and other locations with drugs. They would go on for days. There were cases of baby oil brought in. There were IVs given allegedly to the victims to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. Were there doctors involved? Who else knew about this? What about the hotel workers? What about all the participants? And only until Cassie finally spoke up did this thing start to unravel. And
it's not that difficult to understand because money can buy silence. And that's apparently what happened. So are we going to all be shocked, or are we going to say, no, this has happened before? This is not shocking, People of power can get away with tremendous things because look how many years Harvey Weinstein got away with being a rapist because no one would testify. Oh, the Hollywood stars say Harvey Weinstein is God. Oh, really? He's a rapist, and he got away with it for years. So the same way that Harvey Weinstein got away with it, the same way R. Kelly got away with it, it's money and power. The old expression, absolute power corrupts absolutely. With that said, folks, this was our show for today. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff. We'll be back with some other updates on this case as it moves forward. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.